Yeah.
Quick, think of number 1 to 10.
So for over a year now, I have been feeling like I am losing my mind when it comes to this guy, Wesley Wang. It feels like if you ask the average YouTube commenter, they'd tell you that he's the second coming of Steven Spielberg mixed with Vincent van Gogh and a hint of Mahatma Gandhi. And if you ask the average Letterboxd user, they'd tell you that he's the Antichrist with a camera. That's a real quotation. His short film, Nothing Except Everything, recently went viral here on YouTube, and then promptly entered a deal with Tristar Pictures to be adapted into a feature film, which will be written and directed by Wang himself. This is obviously good news for younger, independent filmmakers. So, what's my problem? My problem is that the short film sucks, and the short film sucks in a way that has a much broader impact than you think. As someone about Wesley Wang's age who also directed a coming-of-age movie recently, and uses my platform to discuss entertainment media, and also happens to be majoring in entertainment media, this video just kind of felt like something I had to do. There is a very one-size-fits-all Wesley Wang narrative floating around out there that suggests that he's this self-made genius filmmaker who's the voice of his generation. As his generation, I don't like that. My intentions with this video are to clarify and criticize the Wesley Wang narrative because things really aren't as simple as they seem. I also want to talk about the movie because I think it has some potentially very negative implications about where the future of cinema could be heading if we let Wesley Wang and filmmakers inspired by him keep doing what they're doing. I want to start by saying that I recently met Wesley Wang. We ran into each other backstage after I had accepted an award for Best Comedy for my short film Apocalypse, written by a 9-year-old child, shameless plug. When I saw him sitting there, I was delirious after winning my award. I was fully on autopilot, so without thinking, I went up to him and offered my hand. I said, "Hey, Wesley, Sam, I'm a fan." He was incredibly nice and congratulated me on my award win. All of this is to say that I don't think I have a personal problem with Wesley. I obviously don't know him very well, but he seems chill, and I'm on the side of all well-intentioned independent filmmakers regardless of my opinion of their work. I guess you could still call him an independent filmmaker. He was once an independent filmmaker. I wasn't even lying when I said I was a fan. In a very real way, I am, even though I probably wouldn't have said so before this interaction. Let's put it this way. Wesley Wang was there at the All-American High School Film Festival, only a year after graduating from that festival himself, to talk about how, in the year since he won Best Overall, he had gone on to score a deal with a major studio, becoming the youngest director ever to do so. I'm a fan of that. I can confidently say that as a young filmmaker, seeing that kind of success modeled only makes my dreams feel more plausible. And that's not nothing. But then there's everything that makes me not a fan, which is what we're about to get into. And let's get one thing straight. A lot of you are going to accuse me of being jealous of Wesley Wang. Short answer, I am. Show me one student filmmaker who wouldn't like to direct a feature film for a major studio and I'll show you a liar. I'm jealous of his success and opportunities, but not necessarily jealous of his filmmaking abilities. I know there are areas in which his work is more impressive and advanced than mine, but I still have faith in my ability to grow at my own pace. So with that, let's get into it. On May 14th, 2004, Wesley Wang was born. Now, I don't know anything about chess, but from what I can tell, Wesley Wang is really fucking good at it. He's an 11-time national champion and a 6-time All-American, even stating in a Colin and Samir interview that his initial career plan was to play it professionally.
When I was a kid, I was actually a very competitive chess player. I was an 11-time national champion, 6-time All-American. So I was actually going to go pro for chess for a long time.
In 5th grade, he co-founded a nonprofit organization called Chess Sanity to help chess reach children in underprivileged communities. This guy is annoyingly good at doing things, hence why I have no choice but to kind of respect him as an individual. I think the fact that he's an absolute unit at chess is actually kind of important to understanding him, but more on that a little bit later. I can't lie to you. I think Wesley Wang is probably a genius. Genius filmmaker? No. Genius/filmmaker? Most likely. More to that point, Wang is also a student studying economics at Harvard University, which is like the Harvard of universities. This profile in the Harvard Crimson paints a picture of an undeniably brilliant, if a little bit pretentious at times, 20-year-old student who has found himself unexpectedly thrust into the Hollywood limelight. Hold on, I thought this guy was a chess player. Rewind. Wang states that he began making movies at 11 years old, which means I beat him to it, so whatever. He says he funded these films by teaching chess lessons. Now, the chess lesson thing is also part of how he recalls funding Nothing Except Everything, so don't forget about that. Remember that nonprofit he co-founded? Well, his co-founder was his older brother, and this article about Chess Sanity states that their parents helped them organize numerous professional and scholastic tournaments. I think it's fair to assume that there's quite a bit of money and assistance coming from the family. I'm not going to make any bold claims about how rich Wesley Wang is, because I don't really know. I even couldn't find information on what his parents do for a living, but I mean, he goes to Harvard. Now, I don't necessarily think that having access to a lot of money discredits anything about you as a filmmaker. Obviously, we all have various levels of privilege. That said, it is a really big obstacle and a really big barrier to entry for like lower income potential filmmakers. So I don't think it's worth being left out of the equation. I think it's very much worth noting for that reason that this is a part of the Wesley Wang conversation that has been in large part misleading. The only reason I say any of this is because this kind of story has a lot of potential to discourage people. We get fed a lot of gear doesn't matter and you can make a great film on your smartphone. But the truth is privilege plays a huge role in the creative process, especially when it comes to filmmaking, and we don't make that clear enough. I'd hate for anyone to see just how professionally made this movie is and think that this is just a couple of friends goofing off in their backyard with a DSLR. If you're a rising filmmaker, you shouldn't be worried about it if your movies don't look like this. Learn on a small scale and expand at a rate that makes you feel comfortable. That's how you learn filmmaking. Nothing Except Everything actually wasn't the first Wesley Wang movie I ever saw, and I didn't realize that until years later on after I had seen his more famous work and actually filed his name away in my brain. So how did he get to this point in his film career? Like I said, Wesley Wang started when he was 11, and some of this work is still on his YouTube channel, and it's pretty much exactly what you would expect from like Gen Z future filmmaker comedy skits on YouTube sort of vibes. It's very similar to what I was doing on YouTube at the time, so nothing objectionable here. I get this. In 2018, I think we get the first glimpse of the Wesley we all know and love today. This film, titled Goodbye, is about a blind girl and her friend. The blind girl asks the friend to tell her what she looks like, to which the friend responds by sitting at a piano to play her a song that she composed. She then begins to play Clair de Lune, like one of the most famous piano pieces ever written. This whole movie is really just kind of a slow-paced friendship montage between these two characters, and once the friend finishes playing her original composition, Clair de Lune, the blind girl responds, "You're beautiful." To be clear, Wesley was 14 here, so I won't be too critical because overall, it's a fairly innocent and sweet story. However, I think this is where Wesley's fatal flaw begins to develop. He's a shameless tearjerker. He will take the easiest path possible to creating short-term, intense emotion in the viewer. This results in films that feel really forced to the point that they're sometimes just funny. You can see this in his 2021 film Eve. At this point in the timeline, Wesley is now 17, which means I'm not fully comfortable making fun of him, but he's pretty close to being tried as an adult in my eyes. Eve is about a homeless mother and her son who really seem to hate each other. She has the worst fake neck tattoo of all time, and it's heavily implied that she's prostituting herself to keep them both from going hungry. The mother is sexually harassed and propositioned by a gas station owner in return for a job, which later on in the film she nearly follows through with. This happens in a montage-style scene where we cut back and forth between a child being beaten nearly to death and a woman being violated by a sleazy man. That's what you should come to expect. It's like if you ask someone to come up with the most extreme situations and subject matter imaginable just to make the audience feel things. And I have no doubt that plenty of audience members for Eve did feel things. I know I did. I was uncomfortable, but not because I was necessarily attached to these characters. In fact, I kind of hated both of them by this point in the movie, but just because the situation being presented was so jarring and bleak. That is definitely not to say that these things can't be depicted in a way that I find tasteful and morally acceptable. It's just to say that Wesley Wang's takes on serious issues always feel forced, preachy, and detached from reality. This was described by several Letterboxd reviewers as poverty porn from a privileged filmmaker. Things only got worse in Mute, which dropped on YouTube just a week before his 18th birthday. Mute is a dystopian sci-fi film taking place in a world where words cost money. That exact premise was, back in 2022, one of those weird TikTok situational acting trends, and I'm not alleging that that's where Wesley got the idea for this film. I'm just pointing out that that is roughly the level of intelligent world building that we're dealing with here. Now, this was my first Wesley Wang movie, and I saw it in 2022 during my Best of Fest screening at the All-American High School Film Festival. And I just remember, after that screening, talking to my mother, having sort of an uncomfortable conversation about how weird and insensitive this movie was. It's definitely not the type of movie you want to watch with your mom. Now, this movie follows a cleaning woman who works for a rich man, but she doesn't have any words because she can't afford them. The rich man repeatedly sexually assaults the woman. Eventually, she works her way up and gains enough money to afford one word. The movie ends with her saying her word to the rich man, and it is no. Which, what the fuck? The conclusions to be drawn from this movie are just mind-boggling. Works of societal significance, especially speculative fiction and allegory, are hailed in the way that they are because they did contribute to the conversation. They let people see a new angle. They tend to come from visionary, very talented people who have earned their statuses as societal commentators. Wesley Wang's best commentary on our insanely complicated and vast and possibly failing society comes in the form of rape is bad and the patriarchy exists, which, good job, Wesley. This one's going on the shelf right in between 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale. Anyway, it is time to talk about the actual topic for today, which is nothing except everything. In 2022, Wesley Wang posted a video on his YouTube channel, linking off to an Indiegogo campaign to raise money for Nothing Except Everything. Wang recalls that he, quote, cold emailed around 200 producers hoping that someone would bite. He ended up with Scott Aroni, an Oscar shortlisted producer. Aroni helped Wesley cast the two main stars, one of whom was previously TikTok famous, and the other of whom is best known for playing the role of young Bruce Wayne on the TV show Gotham. Now, Bruce Wayne is a point of contention for a lot of people. Not for his acting skill. In my opinion, he acts his ass off in the movie, so go this guy. It's more a matter of whether he was actually the right choice for the role. And a lot of that controversy goes back to the Indiegogo campaign video, where Wesley Wang had this to say.
Hi, I'm Wesley Wang. I'm directing this upcoming film about an Asian American high school senior navigating his world of seemingly random possibilities by trying to find order in the number 7.
It would appear that Wesley has whitewashed his own protagonist. I'm choosing my words very carefully here because, like, look at me. I'm clearly not the guy to speak on this with any authority. I was able to find a couple of online forums for Asian Americans that reflected some of them being unhappy with this choice, even going as far as to suggest that the film pushes the quote-unquote white male Asian female narrative stereotype and plays into the fetishization of Asian women. I'm no professor of racial or feminist studies, but judging on the thumbnail and the way the film depicts her character as basically just being pretty without any trackable character traits, I don't know. My theory is that the white male protagonist is, obviously and unfortunately, Hollywood standard. It's become such a disproportionate representation that we're all just used to it, and on some level, I think many people consider someone like Miles in Nothing Except Everything to be a default protagonist. And that's, in large part, what the film is. It's default. It's easy, taking no risks. I'll be getting into that a little bit more later, but I think that the choice to change this casting is reflective of the movie's allergy to doing anything with a distinctive voice, identity, or perspective other than what's already been done way too many times. Now, of course, we can't necessarily assume that Wesley Wang made the final call on this. It's very possible that he insisted throughout the process that an Asian American actor play the role, but one of the producers insisted on this change, in which case, uncool producer, that is super racist and not fun. A lot of people were involved in making a lot of decisions on this film, which is the case in any large-scale production, so we can't necessarily blame Wesley Wang for all of it, and this is one of the things where I think maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt. Once completed, the film hit the festival circuit. It saw fairly impressive success, most notably taking home the Grand Jury Prize from the Indie Shorts Film Festival in Indianapolis. But nobody wanted to make the feature film. Wesley was simply too young. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel him here. That's frustrating. It is hard having a story in your head that you feel like you can't tell. Wesley describes the decision to put the film on YouTube as a, quote, last resort. He knew that it would do pretty well, but didn't anticipate what was coming next. As of filming this video, Nothing Except Everything sits at nearly 8 million views on YouTube. So I watched Nothing Except Everything for the very first time very shortly after it dropped on YouTube. The trailer had gone semi-viral on Instagram Reels and was reposted by one of my filmmaker friends, so I checked it out. Nothing Except Everything, the feature film, is billed as a, quote, romantic sci-fi thriller, which is wild. Is the sci-fi in the room with us right now? Because this is a straight-up, regular-ass coming-of-age film that stole, like, one shot from Everything Everywhere All at Once, and maybe also stole the title a little bit. In fact, this film is so coming-of-age that that's kind of all it is. A genre is a background onto which you project a story. It's a set of conventions that work for a reason. It's fine to use conventions. It's just that Nothing Except Everything is 100% convention. This film is a distillation of the coming-of-age genre that copies its most common traits so thoroughly and frequently that it forgets to be a story as well. It's simply too busy doing unmotivated tropes. I can see how many people would be emotionally affected by it. Like, don't feel bad if you liked the movie. It is moving. It's emotionally impactful, but in the same way that a really good CapCut edit of your favorite movie might be. It's fine, it's technically art, but it can't exist on its own and resonate in the same way because it isn't, on its own, introducing you to anything you haven't already seen. Much like an edit, it's a work of referential art that calls back to something else, something more complete, in this case, the entire coming-of-age genre. It's like a 13-minute parody trailer. You know those Delaney Road TikToks that are like, every coming-of-age movie ever, or like insufferable lead of an indie movie? That's the level of depth I found in Nothing Except Everything. It felt like an extended trailer for a feature film, written entirely by an AI model, trained on a mix of 2000s coming-of-age movies and hopecore TikToks. It had impeccable vibes, I'll give it that, but in terms of story and messaging, it's a mess. It tries so hard to say everything that it feels like it says nothing, at least not in any meaningful capacity. I've joked that it should literally be called Everything Except Nothing.
There's no meaning to any of this.
It actually kind of reminded me of my favorite student film of all time, which is this documentary called Holographic Dreams. Holographic Dreams is a documentary about another movie. It follows a group of filmmakers who decide to make a quote-unquote fake movie, and they make this overly pretentious, meaningless experimental film and submit it to a bunch of festivals. And it ends up doing really well, despite the fact that the filmmakers had no actual intent in terms of what the film means. So the documentary is this very interesting reflection on intent in art and whether intent in art really matters. Nothing Except Everything was like Holographic Dreams, the fake movie that they made as a joke and then later said psych. The difference is Wesley Wang has yet to say psych. Maybe if Wesley Wang comes out and says psych, he's my new favorite filmmaker. Nevertheless, when we first watched this, I turned to my girlfriend and said, "We just watched this year's Best Overall." I was referring to the Best Overall Film Award at the All-American High School Film Festival. It just seemed impossible to me that this movie wouldn't win. In the last 10 years of All-American, there have been 10 Best Overall winners. 10 of them have been dramas, and 10 of them have fallen in the 10 to 20 minute range. They tend to have this very noticeable glossy look and professional appearance that can only really be attained by spending a lot of money. They also tend to center around struggles and experiences specific to the teenage demographic, especially those regarding mental health or philosophy. And let me get this clear, I love All American, and none of this is inherently bad. I love a lot of these movies, but watching Wesley Wang tick box after box after box on the festival bait checklist without putting any sort of spin on any of these tropes just gave me a certain icky feeling. And yes, he did win Best Overall that year, and no, I wasn't very happy to be right about it. I guess that was kind of my issue all along, that Wesley Wang makes filmmaking feel like a series of boxes to check. He comes off as an opportunist. He's scared to do anything original, and we're rewarding that for some reason. As media literate people, that's partly on us. I would not be sitting here criticizing Wesley Wang if he genuinely tried something new and failed, but he didn't. He played this whole film so unbelievably safe that it couldn't possibly not work. Every choice was only made because he knew to some extent that it would work because it already has a million times. As a result, the film has no character because it takes no risks. Wesley Wang is a chess player who applies the same mindset to art. It's strategic. It's whatever's most likely to get him what he wants. He knows he can make some sacrifices, i.e. artistic integrity, along the way, because he'll still come out on top. As I've made clear, I think this movie is, when you dig a little deeper, kind of a pseudo-intellectual shit show, but I don't necessarily blame anybody for enjoying it at face value because, as I've mentioned, it can be pretty moving at times. There are reasons why it is the way it is, and I would like to try and name some of them, and also point out the reasons why people did like this movie along the way. First off, Wesley Wang directed this movie, but TikTok made this movie. The vibes over substance, fast-paced CapCut edit approach is ripped straight from the For You page. The montage of coming-of-age films in the pitch video contains about as much character as the film itself, if not more. On top of that, the soundtrack feels copied from the Trending Sounds tab with some egregiously trendy indie teen summer Spotify playlist vibes thrown in there as well. It's like 50% montage at least. There's a whole sequence where the characters are basically doing man on the street interviews. Characters say mid AF and no cap.
Like, that's just mid AF.
No cap.
The lead actress is best known for her TikTok presence. It leans heavily into the quote-unquote remix culture popularized by short-form video by essentially existing solely as a product of what came before it. That Harvard Crimson profile even notes that Wesley aimed to, quote, stylistically blend the modern content we see on TikTok and Instagram with the medium of film. That's why I'm comfortable calling this video the TikTokification of cinema. Wesley Wang has explicitly stated that that is exactly what he was going for. This feels like the intersection of The Perks of Being a Wallflower and a Mr. Beast video, if that's even possible. I think the TikTok or internet-inspired aesthetic tendencies definitely alienated some older viewers just on their own, but I think it goes very, very far beyond that. That is style, but what about content? Why is this a masterpiece and life-changing to some while being pretentious and vapid to others? I think that the screenplay is very specifically geared towards people who are young right now. I think Nothing Except Everything struck a chord with so many of us because it is a very cynical movie. And I don't use that as a pejorative in this context. I really think that art can be cynical. And in the case of America's Gen Z, we have every right. The planet is on fire. Everyone seems to hate each other. Even in our very modernized time, a repulsive amount of hatred and prejudice and vitriol still exists. Our government, which since we were kids we've been taught to look up to, clearly has no problem with the bombing of civilians, the overthrow of democratically elected governments. Most of us are keenly aware of systemic injustice and poorly equipped to do anything about it. I get it, man. Like, shit sucks. This isn't the way it seemed like it was supposed to be when we were kids. So we, as a generation, are really, really disillusioned. But these news montage segments in the film tend to overlook a lot of our biggest, most divisive problems, instead emphasizing clips of natural disasters, non-controversial travesties, and conflict that we all kind of agree is bad on some level. Again, that is because it is terribly afraid of making even one singular statement that might be a little polarizing. And sure, it doesn't necessarily have an obligation to make a statement, I get that, but I would prefer that it not pretend to be making one while not actually saying anything. You could watch this film wearing anything from a hammer and sickle to a MAGA hat and not be offended. So how can we say this is a film that actually puts forth a worldview? It has concepts of a worldview. One short film produced by a high school student with some striking thematic similarities to Nothing Except Everything is Hudson Flynn's Friday, which also took home Best Overall from the All-American High School Film Festival. Now, Friday is about a school shooting. It's absolutely heartbreaking, to say the least, but it doesn't feel like it tries to force the tears out of you. It contains some of the most impressive use of cinematography and temporal arrangement of shots to form these subtle, implicit relationships between topics and symbols. Friday tackles Gen Z's disillusionment at one of its many sources. It says, "We, the United States, are like this. These things do happen regularly. Our children are dying." It does this in a way that uses your prior knowledge of the state of affairs in America as background information. We don't need an expository info dump and newsreel montage about how much of a problem school shootings have gotten to be. We know because we live it every day. It perfectly illuminates the anxieties and fears of a generation that knows it's been left behind by the failing American experiment, and it does all of that without saying a word of this. This is how film can be beautiful despite tragedy, and tell us something about ourselves that sticks with us. I haven't forgotten Friday since the first time I saw it about 3 years ago. I think about it every time another school shooting happens, which means I think about it pretty often. And despite its controversial thesis statement, I think Friday would have a pretty devastating impact on any viewer, possibly even holding the power to change someone's mind on gun control. As young people, we don't always feel seen. We don't always feel heard. Sometimes that makes us a little bit angry, and we lash out at those who do kind of get to be heard, like our parents, even though they couldn't be more on our side in most cases. That's why I think the whole pessimistic bitch mom trope is such bullshit.
Miles, it's really not that complicated. Go to a good college, get a job, and die.
I think being a dick to your parents if they don't deserve it is a really stupid thing to do, like, genuinely. And I'm not just saying that because my parents watch this channel. And I think that extends to portraying things in such a cynical, mean fashion where all old people are closed-minded and dumb, and all young people are more philosophically and spiritually awake or some bullshit. Let's take something like Lady Bird. The main character is pretty much awful to her mom the entire movie, and vice versa. But this isn't used to make Christine out to be a better person than her mom, or vice versa, and that's what's so special about it. Their argumentative natures and the outside pressures placed on their relationship by class struggle and her father's depression drive a wedge between them, keeping them from having a healthy, communicative, an honest relationship. It is a beautiful film about the things that get in between us and our parents. All coming-of-age films glorify youth to some extent, and that's okay. But Nothing Except Everything seems to think that all wisdom stems from being young, far from death, impulsive, and stupid. And don't get me wrong, I think that there is a lot of wisdom that inherently comes with being young. But this movie completely negates, and in fact, outright rejects the idea that we might have a lot to learn from those that are older than us. Naturally, since it frames young people as having all the keys to the universe's knowledge, it contributes to our collective ego while frustrating those who belong to other age groups. That's why, overwhelmingly, only Gen Z people like this movie. We're the only age group that is tolerated by the screenplay. But it's not just young people who love this movie and older people who hate this movie. I'm younger than Wesley, and I hate this movie. But there are two reasons why I am not proud to call myself a hater in this context. The first one is that I want to see Wesley succeed. I wish that the youngest director in history to set up a studio deal was a better representative for all of us. I have a vested interest in Wesley Wang being a better filmmaker than he is. And the second reason is that this movie's haters are the worst, and I don't want to associate with them. There are two categories of response to Nothing Except Everything. One is an outpouring of love and support, which is, while a little misguided, ultimately well-intentioned. The other is pretty much as far opposite that as you can imagine. You can't really find any negative words about the film in its YouTube comments section. Either they're algorithmically not doing very well, the majority of the YouTube audience being fans of the film already, or Wesley Wang might or might not be doing a little bit of manual filtering. I'm inclined to believe it's a little bit of both. On the flip side, all of the criticism I can find of Wesley Wang is also dog shit. Nothing Except Everything is, in my opinion, a really bad movie, but the tone used by many people ridiculing the movie is, to me, downright unacceptable. The top review on the film's Letterboxd is where a bunch of those negative words in the thumbnail come from. To quote it, "Everything putrid and offensive about 21st century Generation Z filmmaking distilled into a repulsive short. The technological age has provided thoughtless individuals with the false idea that they have something to say, and allows said individuals to project this notion for the whole world to bear witness to." This review is the highest review for a reason. It gets some things right, but it also gets a lot of things wrong. For one, let's state the obvious. Gen Z is capable of remarkable work. Many of us have something to say. Ironically, this guy obviously thinks he has something to say, or he wouldn't be writing fucking 3-page film reviews on the internet about every movie he watches. To read you a little more, student filmmakers, that's in brackets, have no life experience. They haven't had time to truly digest philosophy. Therefore, it leads their attempts at philosophical discussions to be incoherently banal, saying absolutely nothing of value, with 2 exclamation points. I've already referenced numerous works by young filmmakers that have impressed me and stuck with me. I actually did a whole video on great films by high school students a couple of years ago if you want to go check that out. I don't know. I just really think this take is awful, and I hope that this person changes their mind one day. Much like how the film is very cynical towards those older than Gen Z, much of the response is very cynical towards us. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, I guess. What's sad to me is that this film, just by existing and by being kind of pretentious, has permanently altered people's opinions about the artistic potential of the current youth. And I think that, while not necessarily being his direct action, is the worst thing that Wesley Wang has ever done. Over the summer, I actually shot my first feature film, which I wrote throughout my senior year of high school. Sound familiar? It's also a coming-of-age movie, so it really is not too dissimilar to Nothing Except Everything, which makes me awfully nervous. When my film comes out, is it going to be on the receiving end of the same criticism that I'm aiming at Wesley Wang right now? Is this video going to come back and bite me one day? I know deep down that my feature film is the most genuine and honest thing I have ever written. It's based off of my genuine interpretations of the world from when I was a 17-year-old kid, looking back at that sort of in retrospect. I know all of that, but my worry is that somebody who maybe saw Nothing Except Everything and made the unfair judgment call that my entire generation has nothing to contribute to the world of cinema, that person might see my movie and think that I'm being disingenuous. I don't even care if anyone watches my movie and doesn't like it, but if anybody watches my movie and gets the feeling that I get when I watch Nothing Except Everything, that like, oh, this director, this writer is like not being for real with me, like this is not genuine, that is the worst outcome imaginable for me. When it's all said and done, I wish Wesley Wang well. I hope the feature film proves me wrong. I really do want it to be good. If it's not, I fear that's gonna set Gen Z back a step. So, Wesley, if you're watching, whether you and I like it or not, you've been chosen as the informal representative for a generation of filmmakers. It isn't just your reputation on the line anymore. Keep that in mind as you work, because people are genuinely relying on you. For those still watching, if you want to support like really independent student filmmaking, there are a couple of ways that you can do so. First, I'm going to put up a list of great student films that you should look up and watch. I've made and uploaded several short films to this YouTube channel if you are interested in seeing more from me. Next, almost every major crowdfunding site has a browse feature you can use to find projects that people are trying to raise money for. So if you have a little bit to donate, you should consider supporting the arts in that way. Lastly, and probably most importantly, if you know an independent filmmaker in your community, offer your support. Let them know that you're only one call away if they ever need to borrow something you have, whether that be a location, a prop, or anything else. I guarantee if you reach out to the independent filmmaker in your life, they will find a way that you can help them before too long. This is a hard path to take. Often we lack mentorship and resources, making the barrier to entry fairly high despite how advanced digital technology has become. And if you're an indie filmmaker out there, you have only the utmost respect and best wishes from me. Comparison is the thief of joy, so don't be discouraged by the fact that a 19-year-old has a Hollywood deal. I promise you, his situation is vastly different from yours. With that, I believe I have run out of things to say, so thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Until then, I'm Sam Morgan, and this is Pictures Up.